We're going to get started. So, thank you.
Hi, everybody. What a great crowd. So nice to see you all here on this gorgeous day. I'm going to give the land acknowledgement before we start. So we acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. And we encourage everyone to reflect on where you are located and the Indigenous peoples for whom those lands are traditional territory. And as a personal reconciliation action, I've been reading as many Indigenous authors as I can, and I can't recommend Braiding Sweetgrass enough. So if you have not heard of Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, I think is the author's name, it's a wonderful, wonderful book. So that said, welcome to the Amira Innovation Exchange at Signal Hill, also known as the Battery. I'm Angela Antle, and I'm thrilled to be the host this morning. For those who don't know me, I'm a writer and a Memorial alumnus, BA 91. I see a couple of profs here, former profs, and I'm a current PhD candidate at MUN as well. And I'm very pleased to welcome our writers this morning, Marjorie Doyle and Willow Kean. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Hi, Angela.
And today we're going to talk about both their books, Marjorie's Mary Foley, Mary Doyle, and Willow's Eyes in Front When Running. Very different eras, different social realities, but both really excavate motherhood. And I think the gap between the ideal and the reality and the shame that persists in that gap. So there are a lot of common threads that we're going to talk about this morning. So we're going to start with Marjorie. Marjorie Doyle, MA 87, has published 4 books of nonfiction. Her columns, 5 books of nonfiction. Her columns and essays have appeared across Canada in the Globe and Mail, Ottawa Citizen, National Post, Fiddlehead, Geist, Calgary Herald, Queen's Quarterly, Antigonish Review. Her broadcast career included hosting the national CBC radio show That Time of the Night. Yay! She's been awarded a National Magazine Award and, with her brother John, 2 CBC Radio Awards for Programming Excellence and a Golden Sheaf nomination for the documentary Regarding Our Father. A former chair of the Writers' Union of Canada, she's read across Canada and was writer-in-residence at Haig Brown House on Vancouver Island. Welcome.
Thank you, Angela.
So we're going to get you to do a reading first.
Okay. Thank you. So I will read a short passage, and not very much setup is required. I opened the book with an incident in which my grandmother tried to immigrate to Canada in 1939. And with her was her 7-year-old daughter who had Down syndrome. And they were rejected. I mean, my grandmother was allowed in, but my aunt wasn't, so obviously they had to turn around and come home. I want to see my grandmother as she packed up their household for that migration to Canada. Was it a move of desperation or one of hope and promise? There could have been no room for regret as she stood on the wharf, boarded the Bowaters boat, and sailed away to a foreign country. When Newfoundlanders emigrated, they rarely moved back. Their new jobs weren't much: girls in service, laborers, high steel workers. But these economic exiles were relieved to escape poverty and tuberculosis, eager too, perhaps, to avoid watching their own grow older, poorer. What could have prepared Ellen Foley for the rejection? The tools for fighting injustice now, pressing charges, litigation, the media, writing, were all inaccessible to my grandmother. Where did she deposit her rage? Or was it resignation? A confirmation that life was beyond her control. My mother was a fighter. I sometimes think every battle she fought was vicarious, a working out of the one they didn't and couldn't win that day. On the trip back home, the boat steamed towards Bowaters dock. except it was not home. It was just the place they escaped from the days before. Who was there to welcome the Foleys back? Where did they stay that night? Was it rage or shame that consumed them when they had to report why they'd returned, not allowed in? The poet E.J. Pratt describes what the loss of a husband at sea does to a woman's countenance. If he had seen a photo of my grandmother, he would have known it is not just the death of a loved one that can crumple a woman's face. Had Ellen Foley wanted to sail on, renounce the mill town with its faded promises, voyage along the south coast and up into the deep, magnificent waters of Placentia Bay? She had no connection left with her birthplace there, Angles Cove. As for that tiny patch of world, Point Mall, where she'd retreated to have at least one of her children, my mother, that was in-law territory. I am haunted by the fact that my grandmother was only a few steps away from husbandry, from the resources of extended family with their own patch of ground, boats, a bountiful sea. And yet for them, it was an uncrossable chasm. Old Newfoundland centered on the sea, with fishing premises and parcels of land passed on. No fear of not having a roof over your head. Extended families shared a boat and a horse and slide for retrieving firewood. Siblings and in-laws helped with outdoor work, birthing, child-rearing. Did Ellen Foley not have a sister or brother, not an aunt or uncle, who stayed in touch with her? Did her father, remarried, drop her? I'm on the edge of her grave. Grandmother, dear grandmother, speak to me. Tell me one true thing. Were you happy for a moment? There are no souvenirs of my grandmother, not a cup and saucer, not a scarf or brooch. I didn't expect silver combs, but a clip for her waist-length red hair, maybe. There's no ring, no prayer book, no book. I don't know the street she lived on. How can so little be recorded of a life? Ellen Foley lived in the 20th century, lived long enough for her children to grow into adulthood, long enough for them to ask questions, and we are a storytelling culture. Was my own mother's reticence about her family's past cemented in the genes? Or were there reasons for grandmother, too, to speak little about her own early days? My mother claimed not to know who her aunts and uncles were, or even if she had any. Here is every fact I know about my grandmother. She was born in Angles Cove, a tiny inlet on the strip of rocky coastline that crawls along the east side of Placentia Bay. Even this I take on faith. I've never seen a birth certificate. I know the names of her parents and grandparents. I don't know how many siblings she had. I know nothing of her girlhood, except one scene, which I cannot date. One day, when she was a young woman, a girl really, Ellen Coffey was on the beach. This is not a sandy strip for sunbathers and surfers, but a small strand of waterfront, the workplace of Angles Cove. A collector boat came in to pick up fish. On board was William Anthony Foley of Placentia. Around 1910, when Ellen was 19 and William not much more, they married. My mother always said her mother had grade 6, but my aunts later told me she couldn't read or write. Why did she quit school so early? And what did she do between then and marriage? Jane Austen's young women hung around the piano and waited for men. What did Newfoundland girls do, poor ones, in those years? Some went into service, but if so, that would likely have been outside the community. Who in Angles Cove had servants? There was no priest there.
Thank you, Marjorie.
Thank you.
How old was your grandmother when she was sent back from Canada?
Let me think. I'm going to say in her mid to late 40s.
Okay. Wow. What an incredible story. We're going to dig into Marjorie's book and more from Mary Foley, but I'm going to introduce Willow now, who's a BFA 99. She's an actor and writer originally from Labrador West. She's co-written several children's plays that have toured provincially, and her 5-woman comedy Supper Club premiered at the LSPU Hall in 2021. It's hilarious. She's been shortlisted for the Cuffer Prize and longlisted for the NLCU Fresh Fish Award, and she won the Percy Jane's First Novel Award in 2018. Willow lives in St. John's with her partner, filmmaker Justin Sims, and their son Jude. Eyes in Front When Running is her first published novel and is a book about the collision of fear and longing and how the things you fear the most are, the thing you fear the most is often the one thing you need to set you straight. That's great. I would like you now to read from your book.
Okay, thanks. So just a bit of quick backstory.
because I'm reading something from the middle-ish of the novel. Cleo and Jamie have been trying for a baby for a long time. Things aren't going according to plan, and it's causing some tension in their relationship. It's Jamie's birthday, and they've driven to Clarenville for yet another turkey dinner that his mother wants to throw him for his birthday. And the room is full of Jamie's extended family, including Jamie's sister, Krista, who had her first baby when she was 15. And Cleo doesn't really want to be there that day, so she gets really drunk before dinner. Everything's a bit more tolerable now that Cleo's a few drinks in. There's a tiny tug of guilt that she's the one getting drunk on Jamie's birthday, but she tells herself that he's the one who dragged her to Clarenville, so she deserves to enjoy herself more than he does. The gin on an empty stomach has made her famished, so she wolfs down a helping and a half of dinner, and she lets Evelyn and Krista clear her plate. Cleo was sick of the men not helping, not even Jamie, even though he shouldn't have to clear up on his birthday. She doesn't quite get how not helping will get any kind of point across, but she's too tipsy to help clear anything from the table anyway. She turns down Krista's offer of a cup of tea and keeps on with the gin. There's a mangled chorus of happy birthday, and Sophie brings Jamie's cake to the table, flanked by Krista and Evelyn, who are terrified she'll drop it. Hector and Darren are holding iPhones so the twins and Jonathan can FaceTime in from town in Fort McMurray. There is no event in this family that is not monumental. If Cleo had a baby, she'd need security to keep them from rushing the delivery room doors, everyone holding camera phones high in the air. Except Evelyn, she'd be holding a giant platter with a turkey on it. The cake is served, and there's ice cream this time, so Sophie doesn't have a meltdown, and everything is really delicious. Cleo thinks she might just get through the rest of this day, and then it happens. Just imagine, says Evelyn, her mouth half full of cake. This time next year, you might have something else to celebrate on your birthday, or someone, I should say. The whole table laughs, everyone except Jamie and Cleo. Even Sophie and Marcus are laughing, and Cleo doesn't know if it's because they know about the baby stuff too, or if they're feeling left out. See, here's the thing, Evelyn. Cleo shoves a giant spoonful of ice cream into her mouth, and it makes her head and teeth ache with the sudden cold. I had an abortion in Korea when I was 23, and I'm pretty sure my insides are a mess, so we probably can't have kids. I guess Jamie forgot to call and give you the latest developments. And she looks at Jamie when she says the last part, his face like he isn't awake, but his eyes are open and he's not able to move in his sleep. This isn't so bad, she thinks. Feels good to have it all out in the open. She keeps going, raises her third double gin and tonic. Ah, well, we can't all be as fertile as Krista. My eggs aren't exactly 15 years old, you know. The room goes like one of those educational videos from the 50s where a mushroom cloud appears on the horizon, and the next shot is all the kids running out into the hallway at school and putting their heads between their knees and covering the backs of their necks like there is any way in this world to stop the nuclear shitstorm about to hit. Evelyn drops her dessert fork, and the thing that surprises Cleo the most at this very moment is this is the first time she's ever seen dessert forks in the Pike household. No one licked their dinner fork and laid it back on the tablecloth to wait for dessert. Cleo keeps talking even though she can't connect between her brain and tongue, and her face is so hot it's sweaty. No, I'm not being mean. I'm not being mean. That's how it's supposed to be, like evolution. You pop out a bunch of youngsters starting when you're 15, and you get your tubes tied after the last happy accident. That's me, Sophie shouts from the end of the table. She eats a mouthful of cake and bounces on her bum up and down in her chair, happy to be included in the adult conversation. Marcus sits across from Sophie, and he's just old enough to know exactly what's going on. His cheeks redden, and he drops his head. Hector and Darren are the same with their arms crossed. 3 generations of mortification. It's like a weird painting. There's a sober blip on Cleo's radar that there's a child in the room, 2 children, but she can't stop. Somewhere in her head, she's pleased with Sophie for being so smart and grateful she's not able to fully understand the disaster unfolding at the dinner table. Krista gets it. She said, fuck it, I'll start early. And look at her. Everything fell back into place. Cleo points at Krista's chest from across the table, her arm hovering above the tub of ever-sweet margarine with crumbs in it from breakfast, and she says, those boobs are like, look at me. I breastfed 5 babies. 5 babies, and all my shit fell back into place. Cleo hits herself hard, with one pointy index finger thumping her breastbone. It's all for the best, really. I'm 38, so if I had a baby now, I'd be fucked. Krista's mouth drops open, but no sound comes out, and Cleo remembers Krista didn't breastfeed at all, so she's probably justified in feeling some indignation at Cleo's making an example of her. Jamie grabs Cleo by the arm, pulls her from the table, and hauls her out to the living room. Everything is quiet, except for Evelyn crying softly.
Thank you, Willow. I'm going to start with you, Willow. Your book is so intimate, it's very funny, that close third point of view that you've managed to develop and with, throughout the novel. Do you think that comes from playwriting? Is there any link between writing for the stage and that kind of intimacy of the close third?
I think so. Yeah, I've been told by people that I guess my dialogue feels like real and natural, which I guess is good for any writer. But I guess that just comes from years of having to read other people's work and memorize other people's lines, and you kind of get a real feel for that and a real knack for it. Yeah, and it's just it just felt right to do it that way. Like the novel it's not autobiographical, but it's a personal thing. So that just felt like the most natural way to get it out there. And I had in one of the drafts, I actually had 3 or 4 different people, and it was told from the point of views of maybe 3 or 4 different characters. And I had a couple of readers say to me, "You don't need to do that. Everybody just wants to hear it from Cleo's point of view." So that's kind of how it ended up being that way.
Yeah, she's quite a character.
She is.
Marjorie, I want to ask you so many questions, but Grassy Nap sounds like just a fantastical place. How old were you when you lived there?
Well, I was born there.
Yes?
And we moved when I was 11.
Okay. So it must be just larger than life in your memory.
It is, yeah, in a nice way.
Tell us about that place.
Well, it was an 8-acre estate in what everybody now calls downtown St. John's. When I was growing up, downtown St. John's was Barings, and that was it. But now everything's downtown St. John's. Anyway, it was on Carpathian Road, and there are now suburban streets there on either side of it. It was lovely. We had vegetables, although we were in the middle of the city, grew savory and vegetables, had cows and fresh milk and all that kind of thing.
Sliding hill.
Yeah, our own tobogganing hill, yeah. And no, it was quite lovely. One thing that was interesting about it is neither I nor any of my brothers had ever questioned why it was called Grassy Nap. It seems funny now that I think back on it. If you told me your house was such and such, my first question would be why? And many years later, many years later, like in the early 70s, I was camping in Kings Cove, which is the community my dad is from, and I just pitched my tent on the only little piece of grass around. It's a very rocky community. Mm-hmm. I went across the road to knock on the door and ask the woman if I could have some water. She asked me my name, and one thing led to another. She said to me, "You're camped on Grassy Nap." I said, "What?" She said, "That little place where you've pitched your pup tent, that's called Grassy Nap because it's the only verdant," well, she didn't say verdant, "it's the only not rocky thing in this community." Okay. Anyway, long answer. Sorry.
But the Grassy Nap in St. John's was quite a
Yes, it was lovely.
lot bigger than the pup tent area. What did your mother, Mary, walk into when she walked into that house in June 1945?
Well, she walked into 5 stepsons. That's one thing she walked into. She walked into being a second wife. She walked into a marriage with a man who was 25 years older than her, who was well-traveled and well-known. Mm. And she came from, she brought with her that she was young, had poverty in her childhood, but was now a successful working girl as a stenographer. And she walked into the physical grandeur of the house and the estate, and there were people to cook and do things like that. So she walked into a new world.
And was she a fish out of water, or did she just adapt?
I don't know that. I can only speculate. I think that my father was a big personality. I can only speculate on my parents' marriage from various things. I have the idea that he was big enough that he could carry whatever she had to deal with. And had he lived longer, her life would have been completely different. But to walk into what she walked into with a loving man who's secure and loves her, and smooths everything and makes it all. I doubt she even shivered or was afraid. But then after he died, it was a different story.
Right, right. The photographs in your book are beautiful and so rich. You can just see the richness of their life. And I don't mean wealth. I mean the richness of the love.
They had a good time.
Yeah. They had a lot of fun. Where did you come up with Willow, the broody bay boyfriend?
Sorry, the what?
The broody bay boyfriend. Like Jamie wants the child.
Oh, the
way
broody bay
more
boy.
than-
Sorry, you said bay, and I'm like, that's not Clarenville, is it? But yeah, it's funny because Jamie's, at the risk of sounding like politically incorrect, like Jamie's kind of the girl in this relationship in terms of like how society views what men want and what women want, and normally like what we see in popular literature is like the broody woman and like, okay, TikTok, like we got to get on this, right? And the guy's like, oh, but I guess I wanted to flip that on his head a little bit because, I know a lot of women who don't want anything to do with kids. They're happy to have their nieces and nephews and fur babies, and that's great, right? So I think there's a lot more of those women out there than we think there is. And I think there are a lot of guys out there who want to have kids and they might be with a partner who's not so fussy on it. So I guess that's kind of was why I wanted to explore that a bit more. The broody bay boyfriend, though, I like that. I was like, what? Broody bay boyfriend? Yeah, it makes sense though, but I kind of just wanted to take it and flip it.
Did this story start as a play, or was it always going to be a novel or a short story? How did it start?
It's actually pretty funny how the whole thing started. I was with my partner, Justin, who's a filmmaker, and we were at the Atlantic Film Festival. I think it's called something different. Whatever, yeah. So back in 2014, it was the Atlantic Film Festival. And I went with him. He had a film there, so I went for the trip. And I went to one of these pitch wars kind of thing. And it was so great, and it was amazing, and I was so inspired, and I was like, I got a story, I can write a screenplay. And I had this thing in my head about a couple who wanted to have a baby, and one wasn't so hot on it. So I went to this thing, and I was like, I'm gonna write a screenplay, yeah. And then I sat down and I wrote one scene, and I was like, I don't have a clue what I'm doing, I don't write film. That's Justin's job. So I had been writing prose in various ways throughout the years, so I kind of just started writing down random chapters, and it all kind of came together. So yeah, it started as a screenplay, which is like, oh, the actor wanted to write a screenplay, okay, but that's how it started. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it's a novel because
Me
there's
too.
so much nuanced richness
Yeah.
in it, that
Yeah.
maybe you'd see on the screen, but to be able to read it, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of fun in it too. There's a lot of food in it.
There is. Yeah.
She likes cheese.
She does.
I related to that.
yeah, that's a bit autobiographical.
You have a food blog.
I do.
Do you still write that?
I do, yeah. I actually switched over because I'm trying to stay cool with the kids. I just switched over to Substack. So I've been on Substack for about a year. But yeah, I try to put one out every week or so.
And it's called Little Red Chicken.
TheLittleRedChicken.substack.com. Hit the button and subscribe. Yeah, but it's great because writing about food is like a cathartic for me, and so there's, just in terms of like emotional eating and comfort food, there's a lot of reasons to do that lately. So I've just been like angry and writing a lot about food. Yeah,
It's working.
yeah. No, thanks.
Marjorie, what was the trigger for wanting to excavate the sort of mystery of your mom's life?
Oh dear. I suppose because she concealed so much.
But when did you say, I'm going to get to the bottom of this?
After she died, I wrote a 650-word thing in the Globe and Mail that anybody could write at the time. It was not the Honorable J.M. Sullivan writing. And when I saw the 650 words, it seemed skimpy. It didn't seem to do her justice. It didn't seem fair to her. And then that just led me with the idea of writing about her, not necessarily exploring. But as I got into researching and thinking about her and going over things, I realized, how is it possible we know so little? And I grew up in this town and in this culture, so everybody I know,
about everyone.
exactly. I've never encountered anyone who knew so little about, and the two families I married into were full of layers and layers and layers and stories and properties and here and there's the boat and I knew everything about those people and about the kids I went to school with too. But we knew nothing about our own mother, so that was, I'm sorry my answers are so long-winded. Somebody should be waving a flag or something.
We have an hour, it's okay.
I see the timekeeper.
You've really created, like for me as a non-townie, you've really created this sort of mythical early 20th century era for me. Like I really understood a lot more about town after reading your book.
Good, I hope.
Yeah. Where did you start in the excavation process?
I guess I started just reflecting on her. So in other words, that would be my own memories or my own knowledge. And of course, my mother was already alive for, say, 40-something years before my conscious memory kicks in. So there's a whole person there and a life before me. So, but I reflected on my own life and memories and things like that. And then we were a family where somebody or other was taking a lot of photos. There are a lot of photos. There were a lot of films. So I was able to think about her. And then at some point, I got brave enough to talk to my aunts, who were lovely women, whom I'm sorry that I came to a relationship with them so late in life. I really am sorry about that. But anyways, when I did, I started to get some things from them.
Now, I'm going to stop you.
Yeah.
You said brave enough to talk to them. Why would you need bravery to talk to your aunts?
I suppose because I figured my mother might come back from the grave. That kind of bravery. No, I suppose maybe I thought, well, if she wanted stuff hidden, maybe they want stuff hidden too, so maybe I'm wrong to be asking these things, but they were different from her, so I needn't have feared that. And then I went to empirical sources, being census and church records, school records, things like that.
Was there anything you found out that really, like, flattened you, that really surprised you?
Are you from Grand Falls?
I am from Grand Falls.
So I have to say, it astonished me.
And I may know that, Mr. Byrne, but anyway, go on.
My mother was a talkative woman. I mean, she wasn't quiet. I mean, she was just average in chatting. But my brothers and I, had never, ever heard the word Grand Falls. Never. And we'd passed through it umpteen times. You have to pass through Grand Falls, like it or lump it. Anyway, and she never, not a gig. And the day that I learned that she was born and lived the first 6 years of her life and started school in Grand Falls, that was a knock me down moment. It really was.
So it led you to believe she'd kept a lot of other...
It kind of did, yeah.
Do you think part of that was because she came from such a different socioeconomic background as your dad, that she just sort of erased herself?
I think there was a lot of unhappiness in her childhood, and that the easiest way, it seems to me, to protect yourself from continuing to encounter old sadnesses is to avoid people who might remind you of that, and to not think about the things that might trigger that.
Right. You talked at the table, we were having a grand chat, and we
talked about Abram Kean.
Abram Kean, and we talked about your father's shed that Benny Malone broke into when he was a kid, but we'll get to that later. But you talked about a letter.
It's a good table.
You talked about a letter that someone sent you who read the book.
Yes, okay. So I've received, I'm very heartened by the amount of response I've gotten and the kind of response I've gotten. One I just happened to mention anecdotally here. I received a letter recently from a man who's probably in his 76-ish years, and he told me that he graduated from, in 1964, he was graduating from from St. Pat's and entering Brother Rice, and he won a Gerald Doyle scholarship, which was $500, which he tells me was huge at that time. He was from a family with a lot of children and not a lot of material goods. He got pristine uniforms, he got the first blazer he'd ever owned, he got the first clothes that weren't hand-me-downs. But leaving that aside, that wasn't my point. He was writing me to say that all of these years, he remembers the moment that the priest or the brother brought him into Grassinat to meet Mrs. Gerald Doyle because he had won the scholarship. And he says, all these years, I just kept thinking, I was 14 years old, she was beautiful, she blah, blah, blah. I've just kind of made all this up. He wrote me page after page, yes, 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 yes. everything
was a
that he
vindication.
remembered
Yeah.
was exactly what I've written in my book. I just thrown that out there.
That's a lovely story. Willow, I'm gonna go to you now, and you mentioned Justin. He's a filmmaker. He's just done a film about being a father
Yes, yeah.
to a son,
Yeah.
and you're writing a book about being a mother. Like, there's a lot going on in your house.
Yeah, apparently we're stealing a lot from our own lives to make stuff, which, is fine.
Were you both doing the two projects at the same time?
Sort of. Justin's documentary Sons, it's been in the works since like Jude was born. So he'll be 9 in March, so it's been quite a while. This for me was, it was really weird how the whole thing happened. And this, I put pen to paper when I was at the film festival. And Justin and I took a little vacation in a cabin in Nova Scotia. And I started writing this thing. And this was in 2014, and then got pregnant 2 weeks later, no joke, like wild, and then had a miscarriage, sadly, but then 6 months later got pregnant again, and then I had Jude, and when I was pregnant, I was one of those idiots who was like, I'm just gonna like when the baby naps. Like I thought I was gonna get one of those babies.
I was gonna ask you about that.
That didn't work out so good. So when Jude was a year and a half, I have a brilliant mother-in-law who's like, give me the baby and you go. So I rented a little space and finished the book. But between the conception to fruition, it was like almost 10 years, 9 years. 8-9 years, so.
I know there's lots of mommy bloggers and mommy writers, but you seem to have excavated like a type of motherhood, a realistic sort of view of motherhood that I don't think we get a lot of. We still get this sort of shiny, pink, glossy.
Yeah, we do, and I think the sad thing is that I think we were just beginning to have a regular, decent conversation about it, and then Instagram happened, and I think that just wiped all of our brains and took us back like 20 years in terms of like what motherhood should be. But yeah, I just wanted to write about it in a realistic way, and I've had these very like hushed conversations with a lot of friends of mine and a lot of women, like when their kids are 5 or 6 and you're in the schoolyard and you're like, yeah, I had a really hard time and da-da-da-da-da, and you just don't know about it because nobody wants to be the woman who is like, I'm really struggling here. And that was me, right? Like, I guess because I had Jude when I was 39, I had him and then turned 40 like 3 months later. And so I think for me, it was like, I'd had this life, this pretty big, fun life for a long time. And then I had this baby and I was like, oh my, what have I done, And it was really rough for me. He wasn't sleeping, he wasn't eating. The breastfeeding was a nightmare, and it was just, and all these like earth mothers around me who were like with their wraps and their breastfeeding, and they're like, oh yeah, the first few weeks is hard, he'll settle in. And I was just like, hadn't changed my socks in 3 days. Like, it was bad, right? So, and I'm not afraid to talk about it because a lot of women are like, have come up to me, and again, the book is not autobiographical, but some of my experiences are reflected in Cleo's experience, and I just like have no qualms about being honest about. I had one friend, a very good friend of mine, when I was pregnant, and we had this big joke like. We bought an espresso maker, right, when I was 8 months pregnant. And I was like, I'm ready to be a mom. I have an espresso maker. Being tired isn't going to be a big deal. And I had this friend with 2 kids, and she was the only person who didn't lie to me. She was like, yeah, it's really good that you got an espresso maker, because after you have a baby, the only thing that's going to matter is food and coffee and sleep. And I was like, oh, what about my bundle of joy? She's like, yeah, no, trust me. And then a few weeks in, I was like, oh, that's what she meant. So, yeah. Real talk.
Yeah, it is full of real talk, yeah. Marjorie, you have a lifetime as a writer and a broadcaster, but you only delved into this sort of tender spot late in life. Why?
Well, I'm glad you said you were 10 years at that book. I can beat that. This book, while it's coming out now, was a very long time in the making. Okay. Very long time. And I was certainly thinking about it as far back as 2009.
Okay.
And then, since then, well, first of all, I did have other projects and other things I was doing. But the main reason why it has taken so long is that it was a fits and starts thing. I would be into it, and I was interested, and there's detective work in this, so detective work has its own motivation.
Yeah.
It compels you. But then I was struggling with the whole morality of it. I would stop and say, really? Should you really be doing this? That set me back a couple of years.
You mean exposing the truth?
Yeah.
Okay.
If somebody holds something secret, then is it okay for me to... Anyway, that's kind of a separate thing. But, so that would stop me for a few years, and then I would start again, and then I would wrestle with the point of view business of the mother before me, the mother when I was a child, the mother when I was a cranky teenager, the mother when I was an even worse adult.
You do write cranky teenager very well.
Anyway, so the book is out now, but it's not that I just started thinking about it.
Okay.
It's been slow.
Okay. You have a moment in the archives, I think in the rooms, that was really exposed a lot of knowledge to you about what happened with. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to keep it secret?
Because I can't remember, I'm going to keep that secret. I had to pass over that for emotional reasons.
It was about Mary's father.
Oh, about the courts?
Yes.
Let's pass over that.
Okay, we'll pass
So you get to
over
buy the book to find
You have
out.
to buy the book to find that out, yeah. What is the best piece of writing advice you've ever gotten?
The best, that was a good question when you threw out you were going to ask that. Funnily enough, it was just this. I was being mentored by Joan Barfoot many years ago in Banff. And she, I don't know if anybody here knows her, she's older now, but she was a very prolific, well-known Canadian fiction writer from Ontario. And she was great as a mentor. And one day, I don't know if I actually said, what can I do, or whether she just offered this. She said to me, write more beautifully. That's all she said. And I knew she wasn't being vacuous, because she wasn't that kind of person. And I didn't really take much away from it, and I didn't exactly know what she meant. But in time, I think I came to interpret it as being to read and read and read good writing, and then just keep practicing your art, and to hope that by osmosis. Anyway, that's the best piece of writing. I write beautifully.
It is good advice, and if you've worked as a broadcaster or a journalist, it's all about stripping the language bare, and just presenting not just the facts, but a very simplistic story, and then you do write beautifully.
Thank you.
Obviously, you did a good job with all that reading.
That worked out.
Yeah. Willow, what about you? Writing advice.
The best piece of writing advice I ever got came from Ed Rich, and we had him and Francis over, and his wife Francis over for supper years ago before Jude, and we were kind of chatting about novels, and I had this, I told him I started writing, and he said, the best piece of advice I can give you, he said, vomit out a first draft. And I was just really taken aback by that, but after having done it, I'm like, oh, that makes sense, because we have this thing where we self-censor, and you don't, it's so hard. You're like, oh, this sounds stupid, but you just put it on the page anyways. And Justin has a buddy he has this great expression. It's better to be looking at it than be looking for it. So once you got it in front of you, it's easier to cut than it is to find it and write it. So when I wrote this novel, it was an obscene amount of words. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's ready to go. The editors were like, oh, she's new. She doesn't know what she's doing. So it just, you got to hack away at it, I've learned. But yeah, it's better to just have it and then work with what you have as opposed to agonizing about writing it down. So yeah, vomit out a first draft. Thank you, Ed Rich.
Tell me about the title, Eyes in Front When Running.
That kind of came from having Jude. We were on Fogo Island. Justin was doing an NFB thing, and Jude and I tagged along. And he was a year and a half old, and I had him in the hiking backpack. And there's one of the hikes there, and it was on the wooden planks or whatever. And he was running, and kids or toddlers, they're just running like this, and he would run into a ditch or run off the plank, and I'd go, and I've been yelling this at him since he was a toddler, eyes in front, buddy, eyes in front, and so that kind of just was a theme throughout his, and the book had so many titles, but that's the one that kind of came to my head, keep your eyes in front when you're, it's like Cleo, right? just watch where you're going, because shit is not going to end up like how you think it is, right? So that's, long answer, but that's where it came from.
I think I'm going to open up to the floor for questions. I'm sure people have lots of questions for Marjorie and Willow. Come on, don't be shy. Okay, Benny, tell us the story about the shed. Come on.
Tell us about the shed.
I loved your book, Marjorie.
Thank you.
And it really, like Angela said, it really did bring me back to St. John's and in that era, which I also loved. And we lived and breathed it, and it's great to see it come to life. And I loved your documentary movie about your dad too. That whole era, I just love it. But yeah, we moved into when I was about 6, no, I was about 8 or 9. We moved from the east end of town, the west end of town, Mount Royal Avenue. It's probably the east end of town now. Everything keeps changing, but it was far away at the time, to Pine Bud Avenue, which was right near where Grassy Knap was. And I didn't know about Grassy Knap, but I knew there was an estate in there. And so on the other side of Pine Bud Avenue, the entire line of back fences was the line of your estate, really. So when we used to go over in people's backyards and pick, crab apples and stuff like that, that fence was there, it's like the wall. Eventually, we just had to climb that fence and get in. I think this must have been after you had moved out. So this would have been around 1965, 66, 67.
We had just moved out. So you were peeping on the nuns.
Yeah, so we were peeping in on the nuns. I had a vague idea it might be the nuns there. Anyway, there was a whole bunch of outbuildings there, and so then we had to break into them. Because they were clearly abandoned. Clearly, the place was clearly abandoned. It must have been in the interregnum period between the nuns moving in. And it was filled with bottles, just filled with tiny bottles. And it was like a mad scientist's laboratory. I didn't realize that. I realized after, Joe Doyle and Carte d'Ivoire. It must have been what we stumbled into. But it was a great memory. And I wish I'd known you earlier and got invited to Grassy Knap, because it sounds like Disneyland in the middle of St. John's. So anyway.
Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. I want to talk about the importance of writing in Newfoundland, and maybe at this moment when our very existence is questioned and our very sovereignty is being questioned, without saying the T word. But what do you think about where writing is going in Newfoundland and how important a role it has played?
First.
Come on, this is the PhD question of the morning.
Writing in Newfoundland is one place where I feel pretty good. I feel pretty hopeful about it. My God, there's so many good writers here. I mean, artists in general, it's ridiculous. And I feel like, and there's always this thing, like I've toured a bit across Canada with shows, and like, there's always this thing where it's like, oh, the Newfies, are we going to be able to understand you? And oh, you better slow down your accents. Oh yeah, like when I toured with Tempting Providence and at a theater in BC, and the AD was like, you guys are going to have to slow down. Like, where if that was like, a company from Ireland or Scotland, it wouldn't be an issue, right? So, but I feel like we read books and it's like set in New York or set in London or set in Paris. And I think St. John's and other cities and towns and outports in Newfoundland and Labrador are becoming those places in literature, and that makes me really excited. Like I remember years ago when I read Michael Winter's This All Happened, and I was like, oh man, and this was before I actually lived here. I was like, St. John's sounds like such a cool place to live, and I just think that it's becoming a recognizable place, Newfoundland, in lit, and I feel really hopeful about it. I don't feel hopeful about a lot these days, but in terms of writing in Newfoundland, like I think it's really exciting, and there's a lot of people writing about things that aren't normally written about, So, and the reality of it, not all just the windblown clothes and the clapboard, everything is set in Trinity, like it's, right. No offense against Trinity, I love it, but you know what I mean? Like, let's show the real Newfoundland, and I think a lot of that is happening.
There's certainly a generosity in the arts community to help each other.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We're so, and the same thing with theater and film and stuff here too. Like I've done self-tapes with friends, and then we turn around and I'll do her tape, and we're for the same part, right? So, but in the lit here, it's just like the literary community is so helpful. Like I had like professional, awesome writers like Michael Crumb. He's like, yeah, I'll read your book for you. I was like, what? Okay, like just people want to help you and they want like. And I mean, we all know the stories about Lisa Moore. My God, she's just like a legend in terms of getting new work out there. And like Michelle Butler Hallett read my book. Like I was just so helped out at such a great level by so many like nationally renowned and internationally renowned writers. That very grateful for that. Yeah.
Marjorie?
Well, I agree with everything that Willow has said. It's rich. It's absolutely rich. And I think sometimes people outside Newfoundland think we say that. We say that, like we're smarter, we're better, we're funnier, we're more
But we
there are
are.
more
It's
singers.
It's true.
Exactly. There are more singers per capita. There are more musicians, we're more musical. It's all true.
Sorry, Brampton. Yeah.
But yes, it's overwhelming, but in a good way. But like years ago, as a book collector, you tried to keep up with every Newfoundland book
Every
that was
Newfoundland
coming out.
book,
That
yeah.
was pretty darn easy. And now it's rich, but it's great. And there's good stuff, there's great stuff, there's phenomenal stuff, there's stuff not quite as good. It doesn't matter. It's all there, and we can all make choices and enjoy it. And it covers everything. Like people are writing about everything, and bring it on. I say,
Yep.
Bring it on.
This might be a good time for you to talk about your picks.
My picks. Yes, maybe I can do it without my piece of paper. Yeah, so we were asked to mention 3 books.
Right behind you.
Oh, okay.
I was like on my list. Okay, it's
I was going to move over there and get a pointer. No. So we were asked, to mention 3 books we've read recently that are new or new-ish. So one that I want to talk about briefly, we were told to be brief, is Andy Jones's Actor Needs Restraint. And I feel I don't have to say anything about Andy. Brilliant, period. I'd like to see, the title, by the way, comes from a review that was done on the mainland of him years ago. That was a line in the review. Which happily Andy paid no attention to. Anyway, I would like to see an edict come from the government that everybody has to have that book on their bedside table. So you get up in the morning, you start the day with a smile on your face. Another is Mary Dalton's newest poetry collection, which is called Interrobang. I didn't know the word. Did you know the word?
I didn't know the word, no.
So it is a word. I thought maybe she had minted it. It's a punctuation mark that's a cross between an exclamation point and a question mark. And that's a very apt title for her collection, and it's enough to intrigue you to walk into it. The title says it all. The third is from a young man, a young writer whom I didn't know. His name is Michael Connors. I think he's a journalist. He's written a book called Admit Strangers, The Forgotten History of the Newfoundland and Labrador Press Gallery Association. I loved this book because it's an example of somebody, kind of out of the blue, taking a little corner of very important Newfoundland history that most of us don't know much about and writing about it. So hats off to him, and I wanted to draw your attention to it.
Okay, great. Willow, you have some picks as well?
I do. I hope I get my. Oh, there
yeah,
we go.
there you are.
They asked me for 5, so sorry, Marjorie. Yeah. These are kind of all. Yeah. I mean, it was so hard. Like I had so many picks, but I think Vigil, like we were talking about. People portraying Newfoundland in the real way. Like, we all know
Absolutely.
we have the issues that most big cities do these days. And Susie Taylor's Vigil really kind of strips the Newfoundland tourism ad and kind of shows what we see every day, but in a beautiful way. And like it's so much more difficult than Good Guys, Bad Guys with her novel. Well, it's a collection of short stories, but it kind of reads like a novel. And it's just like, it's one of those books that just everybody should read. Yeah. Bernice Morgan, The Topography of Love. I was really shamefully late to Bernice Morgan, and I only read that book a few years ago, and it just slayed me. I think it's the most underrated collection of short stories in Canada. I love it. The story, Vain Deceit, about a woman during the end of World War II here in St. John's with a new baby who wants to go out, and can't, but she does anyway. It just blew my mind. It just cracked me right open. I just loved it. I met Bernice Morgan a few weeks ago at an event, and I totally fangirled. I was like, yeah. Like, so embarrassing. But yeah, if you haven't read it, read it. It's just friggin' fantastic. Michael Crummy, I mean, come on, all of his books are deadly, but The Wreckage, just like, when I read it, it read to me like a movie. It was like, how come, you need a Spielberg-esque budget, but how come no one's, optioned this and made it a movie? I think it's like, I like to call it Newfoundland's The Notebook, but it's like way better and not as sentimental, and it's awesome. So if you haven't read it, read it. It's just like, rips my guts out. Lisa Moore, Something for Everyone. Again, like, her short stories, like you think you can write, and then you read Lisa Moore, you're like, oh yeah, no, I thought I could, but I can't. She's just a genius. And there's a story in there called Lighting Up the Dark, and it's about Santa Claus. And I think Lisa Moore might be the only writer who can write about Santa Claus and not have it be really cheesy. And I think I was working on my play, and I was having a lot of issues, and I read when I'm stuck, so I read this story about Santa Claus, Lighting Up the Dark, and I put my head on my desk and just wept, right? Just bawled. It's so gorgeous. So you should read that book. And Death on the Ice is, speaking of Abram Kean and my dodgy lineage, that book, I mean, we all had to read it in high school, and you're like, okay, whatever, Death on the Ice, I had to read it. I picked it up again years later when I was working on a theater project about the ceiling disaster. And it is so, when you read this book because you want to and not because you have to as a teenager, it's a whole different thing. And when I think about it now, like when I read the stories, I was just really moved and very enraged and confused. And I think that the most disturbing thing about that book is that the disparity between rich and poor has only gotten worse. And I think anything like this could happen now, and it wouldn't shock anybody. And yes, a lot of people ask. I am of those Keans, of the Abram Kean people. And
It's okay, Willow, it's okay.
yeah, I know. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. But
And Cassie Brown really should have gotten way more attention.
oh, absolutely, absolutely, totally underrated. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your picks and for your answers and your readings. What are you working on now, and what are you working on now? You're going to go first, Marjorie.
You're going to go first on this one, Marjorie.
Age. I don't know if most writers would say this or not, but for me, a large part of writing is definitely thinking. It's in the stage of, I don't mean intellectualizing, I mean literally saying, this is what I want to do, but hang on, before you take that first step, make sure you're going to be able to stick with that material or subject for 3 years, 5 years, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to jump into something and say afterward, you idiot, you should have thought that through. So I'm in the thinking stage.
Oh, very, very
That's a
political
lovely answer.
That's great.
I'll sell you that for 25 cents.
Don't think too much now. Do something else.
I am, because I'm a masochist, working on another novel. So that's just in its kind of early stages, but I'm having a lot of fun with that. And I'm also, my play, Supper Club, is being performed at the Grosvenor Theatre Festival next summer.
Oh, great.
But it's going to be like a dinner theater version, so I'm working on like some cuts and edits and stuff like that. And
Tell us a little bit about Supper Club. Do the pitch.
Oh, okay. Well, Supper Club is a play. It's a 5-woman comedy about women who, from all different walks of life and ages, who gather together every couple months to host a dinner party. And everything is. I've been in a supper club, so there's always that underlying like competition, like like I'm going to win this month, and so and so's food, chicken again, or like this dessert's going to kill it, and yeah. So my supper club is brilliant, but I kind of wanted to write a play about what if it wasn't, and what if there were secret alliances and competition, and then there's a vegan, everybody's very resentful because they have to find vegan alternatives, and there's a woman from Cuba who's like, oh my God, this vegan, I had to eat everything that was put in front of me when I was a kid, and so, but they're all friends, and it all turns out okay, but it's a comedy, and it's got a lot of bad words, and
It's a lot of real talk.
a lot of real talk, 5 ladies around a table with wine and maybe other things, and shit gets real. Yeah.
Yes.
But if you're going to be in Cowhead this summer, it's going to be the dinner theater out there this year. So
Excellent.
yeah, so I think they're going to do like a pairing per dinner, or a little like a tasting menu. So yeah, check it out if you're in
Fancy.
Cowhead.
All right, well, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Do we have some online questions? Heidi has a question. Oh, Heidi has a question. Oh, go ahead, Heidi.
Do you dog leaf your books? I was only going to fill the air if we had a question.
I wondered who wrote that
Janet,
question.
I don't. I have bookmarks, or I often have pieces of my kids' art that I use as bookmarks, like little things he's drawn and stuff.
I dog
So
ear,
I
underline, draw arrows.
Or it depends on
What
the
does
book,
dog ear
really.
mean? You know, like turn down the corner.
I do my cookbooks. My cookbook is if I've made something or I want to make it, I'll do that, but not generally with like fiction or nonfiction.
I'm very old-fashioned. I use a bookmark. Yeah, very word. You can rest easy. Now go on.
Before we go, are there any other questions in the room for Marjorie or for Willow? Oh, great. Debbie. Debbie McGee, to the rescue.
I just wanted to ask if you could both describe, or each describe a bit of your process of working with your editor.
Good question.
Well,
No, go ahead.
I'm happy to go first now. My
give up.
editor is brilliant, and she's sitting right there. Stand up, Stephanie.
Oh, Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie.
So
Stephanie Porter.
She's Stephanie Porter of Boulder Books, and there's my publisher, Gavin. And she's brilliant, easy to work with, and it was just an excellent process.
How many times back and forth? Give us a little more.
Truth or consequences?
Truth, we want truth.
Not too much. Very civilized, I thought. Yeah. Let's bring the copy editor in here.
No.
You?
Mine was probably different because this was my first novel, so I had a lot, even at the ripe old age of like, whatever I was, 46, 47, when I worked with an editor for the first time, it was like, I learned so much. Like Marnie Parsons was my editor, who's brilliant, and Claire Wilkshire was my copy editor, who was equally brilliant. And I was like, I didn't know how to use an M-dash until I met Claire, right? Like I was just completely, like I've been blogging for 10 years. This is gonna be easy, but wow, just stuff you don't know. And I talk a lot, I'm very repetitive in general in my life. So I had a lot of repetition issues in my book and stuff that we had to hack and slash away at. And also I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to technology. I was like, what's track changes? I don't know how to use this. Like it was bad, right? So thankfully these brilliant women were like very, very incredibly patient with me. And I learned a lot, but it was fun and I liked it. And I didn't cry once, I don't think, which for me is a big deal. Yeah.
Only Lisa Moore's story made you cry.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? I saw another hand back there.
So, I'm so glad I came here today. I came here as a spear. But I'm here. I know Marjorie, and I've met her before, okay? And I knew Patrick. I know your nephew, Mike. And I went to school with your brother, John. And I read your book, and I loved it. So I can stay at least halfway. I didn't know Willow.
I hope you got a discount, did you?
And Willow, I enjoyed your story so much. And when you told the story about going across the boardwalk, it brought me back to 1977 when my 49-year-old son was 2.5, doing the boardwalk over to Western Brook Pond.
Oh, yes.
Andrew, keep your eyes, watch what you're going.
There you
Andrew,
go.
watch where you're.
Yeah.
I got to read your book.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm glad I'm here.
I'm glad you're here too.
And I'm a spear, you know.
Sometimes spares have the most fun though. So.
My wife asked me to go. I said, the best thing is to say yes, because if I say no, she'll get mad at me.
That's
and then
it.
I end up going anyway.
Smart fella.
Anyhow, I'm enjoying myself here.
I'm delighted. I'm delighted you're here. Thank you.
Any other questions in the room? Oh, there's a hand over there by the coffee machine.
They're making you work for it this morning, Janet.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question about social media and how much emphasis you put on that, and how much of that do you factor into the sales of your books and in connecting with readers?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. I hate social media, especially this past week. But it's, sadly, it's I had a bit of a crisis a couple days ago because they've started like censoring a bunch of like abortion access care information on Instagram, and I just was like, I lost my mind a bit, and I wanted to shut everything down, shut it down. But it's so hard these days to not use it, and I really struggle with it. Still promotion in general, you feel really gross, but like you kind of had to do it these days. I wish we could all be Jonathan Franzen and be like, I don't do social media. Like, good for you, buddy. But it's hard. I find it really difficult. And when I signed on with Breakwater in the contract, it's like, if you don't have it, you should, right? You should get a Twitter and a this and a that, all of which I had, but not Twitter anymore.
Blue Sky.
I just started on the Blue Sky. Blue Sky's not so bad.
No
And
ads.
Substack is becoming more of a thing too. A lot of people are gravitating there. But yeah, Marjorie, what do you think? I think it's awful.
I have absolutely nothing to do with social media.
That's because you're smarter than the rest of us.
I'm not on Instagram. I don't even know what it is. Just when Buddy comes to the house with a little piece of paper.
You're not on Facebook.
I'm on nothing. I have a very static website, which I use as a calling card, so that if somebody says to me, what do you write, or asks me anything, I just, my website. So I have a very static website that I've had for years, and I do absolutely nothing on social media.
Well, let's face it, in St. John's, you don't really need social media. Right?
Yeah.
You go to everything. I see you everywhere. You're your own social media platform.
There you go.
Yeah, with theater too, it's like the same thing when you're promoting plays and stuff. It's like we did a little show. We do a show every couple of years called the Christmas Monologues at the Hall.
Yeah.
And we went on Facebook and we're like, here's a show, and it sold out in 2 days, and we didn't have to put up a poster. We didn't have to do anything, right? So it's like when I think about the work they're going to make you do if you have to quit social media, it's a lot. Yeah, but.
Was there a particular element of social media that you wanted to explore or critique?
I never did see the
Well,
question.
I just, I'm an older gal, okay? I'm 62 and I'm a writer. And I had an online magazine at one point, and so I've gone through all this stuff with social media and got off of all of it except for Facebook. But what concerns me is the way that it's gone toward things like book talk. And it's like people are just kind of going through books to be on there for a little bit of temporary fame. And it's kind of relegating good literature and writing to this weird machine that's just kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but it's kind of ugly. But I also, the thing about social media, a lot of publishers do require that writers do this and maintain some kind of relationship with readers or potential readers. And I was really just curious about how you guys, and you've more than answered my question, about how you, position yourself in that world. And Marjorie, love you for that.
Oh, hey, I'll take that.
Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. And there's Sharpies up here, and Marjorie and Willow will sign your books or answer your questions.
Thank you, Angela. Very
Thank
much.
you, Angela, and thank you,
pleasure.
Marjorie. This was
My pleasure.
excellent.
Lovely to meet you.
I love topography of my.
Oh, I think
Oh my God.
I'm supposed to. Oh
my God.
She's giving me
I've
the
read it
signal.
in a
I've left
long
something
time.
off.
Yeah, I love it.
Will you know the
The
story
next
I'm talking about?
Coastlines event.
I can't remember now.
I'm supposed to talk
I read
about
it.
that, right?
That's been out since.
Okay,
Oh my God,
you guys
like
got to be
2000
quiet
or
for a
something.
second. I forgot something. The next Coastlines event will be part of Memorial's 100th anniversary celebrations and will examine the influence of the English department and most specifically Memorial's creative writing program. Did you know we have a creative writing program in the English department here at MUN? Our panelists will be writers and faculty members Dr. Larry Matthews, Lisa Moore, and Mary Dalton. I will be out of the country at the time in Munich as the Rachel Carson writer in residence.
Ooh, wow.
Poor Angela.
Good for you. Excellent.
Yeah. Janice said I had to say that. And William Ping is going to sit in my place, and he's lovely and charming, has a much deeper voice than I do. He's going to be your event moderator and host, and that will be happening Saturday, April 26th. So if you want to avoid social media, write it on your hand. Saturday, April 26th, the exact time and location to be confirmed. So thanks, everyone.
Tell us about the writer in residence thing.
I